There is a reason some gardeners pull massive, thick-walled bell peppers off their plants, while others end up with small, hollow, disappointing fruit season after season. It is not luck. It is not climate. It is not even the variety they chose. The difference comes down to a handful of biological principles most home growers have simply never been taught. Once you understand what is actually happening beneath the soil and inside the plant, the gap between a mediocre harvest and an extraordinary one starts to make perfect sense. The first failure point happens before the seedling ever touches the garden bed, and almost nobody recognizes it. Transplant shock is a silent killer of pepper potential. When a seedling moves from a controlled nursery environment into open ground without adequate root hydration, the fine root hairs responsible for absorbing water and nutrients begin drying out within minutes. The plant stalls, and growth halts for weeks while it struggles to recover. What experienced growers discovered is that submerging root balls in a bucket of water for 15 to 20 minutes before planting completely saturates the root system and dramatically cuts establishment time. There is an even stranger addition that accelerates this process. A tablespoon of ordinary white sugar dissolved in that soaking water provides a direct energy source that mirrors what the plant produces on its own through photosynthesis. It bypasses the energy bottleneck that transplant stress creates. Seedlings visibly respond. Drooping foliage firms up, stems straighten out, and the plant enters the soil primed to grow rather than primed to survive. That soaking window also reveals damaged or yellowing lower leaves that are silently draining energy the plant desperately needs for root development. One of the most persistent myths in home gardening involves planting depth. Most people know that tomatoes thrive when buried deep because they develop adventitious roots along submerged stems. Bell peppers lack this ability entirely. Burying pepper stems too far underground traps moisture against tissue that has no mechanism to use it, creating perfect conditions for stem rot and fungal infection. The biology demands a different approach. A hole roughly 6 to 8 inches deep, with the first set of true leaves sitting just above the soil surface, buries only enough lower stem to provide stability without inviting disease. This matters enormously because a single bell pepper plant can support a dozen or more heavy fruits simultaneously. That kind of load requires an extensive, resilient root network, and a compromised foundation leads to dropped blossoms, undersized fruit, and plants that topple in the first strong wind. Even the shape of the soil surface plays a role. Any depression or bowl around the base channels water against the vulnerable stem. So a level surface or a gentle mound is essential. Perhaps the most misunderstood problem in pepper cultivation is blossom end rot. That dark, sunken lesion spreading across the bottom of a developing fruit looks exactly like a disease attacked it, but the real cause is a calcium deficiency. And here is the paradox. Most affected gardens contain plenty of calcium in the soil. The failure is not supply, it is access. When soil pH drifts outside the 6.0 to 6.8 range, or when watering swings between drought and flooding, calcium becomes chemically locked in the soil where roots simply cannot extract it. Wood ash from untreated firewood tackles both sides of this problem. It supplies calcium carbonate directly into the root zone while gently nudging acidic soil toward the optimal absorption window. The potassium in that same wood ash simultaneously drives fruit sizing and wall thickness, which is the literal difference between a papery, hollow pepper and a dense, satisfying one. Bone meal works as an effective alternative, delivering concentrated phosphorus that accelerates root expansion and flowering. Either amendment mixed into the planting hole with a thin soil buffer above it places nutrients exactly where developing roots encounter them first. Watering is where conventional gardening wisdom causes the most damage to bell pepper crops. Pepper foliage is remarkably vulnerable to moisture. Water sitting on leaves creates a breeding ground for bacterial leaf spot and fungal pathogens that can devastate an entire planting within days. Overhead irrigation spreads those pathogens through droplets that splash between plants. Surface watering creates a different set of failures because it forms a hard soil crust, encourages shallow roots, and loses most of the water to evaporation before it reaches the root zone. A buried container method solves every one of these problems at once. An old nursery pot or a plastic bottle with 10 to 15 holes punched through its walls, sunk into the ground 6 inches from the plant with the rim at surface level, delivers water directly into the deep root zone when filled. The soil surface stays dry, foliage stays untouched, and roots receive slow, even saturation that draws them downward rather than spreading along the vulnerable surface. Deep-rooted plants access moisture reserves far below the topsoil, making them dramatically more resilient to heat and drought. That consistent deep hydration also maintains steady calcium transport through the plant, connecting directly back to the blossom end rot paradox. There is one more biological connection most growers never discover. When bell pepper plants enter their flowering and fruiting stage, their demand for magnesium spikes sharply. Magnesium sits at the molecular center of every chlorophyll molecule, and chlorophyll is the engine converting sunlight into the chemical energy that powers fruit production. A magnesium shortfall at this stage quietly throttles the plant's photosynthetic output, resulting in fewer fruits that finish smaller with thinner walls. 1 tablespoon of Epsom salt dissolved in a gallon of water, applied to the soil every 2 to 3 weeks during flowering and fruiting, delivers bioavailable magnesium right where the plant needs it. The response shows up as darker green foliage, better flower retention, and noticeably larger, heavier fruit. A single inexpensive box lasts an entire season. Even when every other factor is optimized, overcrowding quietly undermines the whole system. Plants packed too tightly create a dense canopy that traps humid air against foliage, increasing disease pressure from the exact same pathogens that overhead watering invites. Tight spacing also shades lower leaves, causing them to yellow and drop, which directly reduces the photosynthetic energy budget available for fruit production. 18 to 24 inches between plants and 24 to 36 inches between rows provide the air circulation and light penetration that allow every other investment to actually pay off. What separates a mediocre pepper harvest from an extraordinary one is not any single technique. It is the compound effect of addressing every biological bottleneck in sequence. Those steps include pre-transplant hydration, correct planting depth, calcium and potassium availability, deep zone irrigation, magnesium supplementation, and adequate airflow. None of it is expensive and none of it is complicated. It simply reflects an understanding of what the plant is actually demanding at each growth stage. When those demands are met, the response is unmistakable. The result is thick-walled, heavy, deeply colored bell peppers in quantities that make the effort undeniably worth it.